"Run, sweet girl, run." The words would come later, torn from Adelaide Morrison's throat like a prayer. But that June morning in Timber Creek, Colorado territory, no one imagined the fat woman they mocked would be the one to stand between a child and hell itself. Addie shifted the basket on her hip as she crossed the main street, feeling eyes on her the way she always did. At 340 pounds, she was impossible to ignore and easy to ridicule. Laughter followed her like dust. "There she goes," someone drawled from the saloon doorway, town grain silo on 2 legs. "Careful, boys," the storekeeper chuckled. "If she trips, we'll have an earthquake." A few men laughed too loudly. A boy of 12 pointed and snickered. 2 women on the boardwalk turned their backs, whispering behind gloved hands. Addie kept walking, cheeks burning, eyes fixed on the distant line of pines outside town. "Where you off to, Addie?" the storekeeper called. "Forest don't got enough berries for you already?" "Herbs," Addie said quietly, "for medicines." "That's so?" He smirked. "Surprised you see the plants past your own belly." More laughter. Addie tightened her grip on the basket and said nothing. There was no point answering. In Timber Creek, a fat woman was not a person. She was entertainment. She made it past the last building and into open meadow, the town's jeers fading behind her. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. Out here, among wild flowers and tall grass, the earth did not judge her. The trees didn't care how much space she took. The wind never laughed. She climbed into the shade of the forest, following the familiar path along Timber Creek. Her grandmother had walked these same trails, teaching Addie which leaves soothed fevers, which roots eased pain, which bark could close a wound. Out here, she was not a burden. She was useful. She had just knelt to cut a patch of yarrow when she heard it. A scream, high, piercing, full of raw terror. Addie froze. "Please, Papa, Papa, help me." The voice was small, a child, close. Then came rough male laughter and the crack of branches beneath horses. Addie's heart slammed against her ribs. If you're listening to this story right now, from America or Europe, from a big city or a quiet village, tell me in the comments where you are in the world. These old frontier stories travel farther than any wagon ever did, and I'd love to know where they've reached you. She moved toward the sound, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. But the child screamed again, and Addie pushed through the underbrush until she could see the scene below. A little girl running, braids flying, dress torn, 3 mounted men closing in with ropes ready. One dismounted, reaching for the child. Addie burst from the trees with a roar and hit him like a charging bull. He went down, skull cracking against stone, body limp. "Run, sweet girl, run!" Addie shouted. "Follow the creek and don't look back." The girl fled. The remaining 2 men wheeled their horses toward Addie, hatred in their eyes, guns sliding from holsters. "You fat bitch," one snarled. "You just killed Silas. Now you die." He raised his pistol. The shot never came. A rifle thundered from somewhere beyond the trees, close and deadly sure, and the man pitched sideways off his horse. Another shot. The 3rd rider crumpled too, falling into the ferns. Addie turned, breath ragged, heart pounding, to see who had fired. A huge figure on horseback emerged from the trees, rifle still smoking, eyes dark and murderous, searching for his child. Before we continue, let me ask you, where are you listening from today? Whether you're at home or on the road, I wish you a warm and joyful Christmas. Now, let's get back to the story. Addie stood frozen, breath heaving, hands trembling so violently She had to clutch the nearest tree to keep from collapsing. The enormous man rode toward her with a fury so intense the air seemed to tighten around him. His rifle was still lifted, angled toward any threat that dared move. "Rosie!" he shouted, voice raw with panic. "Rosie, answer me!" The little girl burst from the underbrush, sobbing, "Papa!" The man practically fell from his horse, dropping to his knees in the dirt as he swept the child into his arms. His hand shook as he cupped the girl's face, checking every inch for injuries. "Did they hurt you? Did they touch you? Tell me the truth." Rosie clung to him. "No, the lady saved me. She hit the bad man and told me to run. She stayed so they wouldn't catch me again." Only then did the man turn, his gaze locked onto Addie. He was terrifying. 6'10" if he was an inch, shoulders as broad as a barn door, hair long and wild, beard streaked with gray, eyes dark as the inside of a storm. He looked like a man carved from the Rockies themselves, built to endure winters and war, and whatever violence the frontier spat in his path. But when he looked at Addie, something shifted. The fury eased enough to see the exhaustion beneath, the drying blood on his shirt, the 3 bullet wounds just beginning to clot. The weight of fear for a daughter he thought he had already lost. "You saved my child," he said quietly. Addie swallowed hard. I tried." He closed the distance in 2 strides. Addie flinched, expecting anger or blame. Instead, he caught her just as her knees gave out. "You're shaking," he said. "Adrenaline crash. Breathe." "I'm too heavy." "You're not too anything," he interrupted. "Sit." He eased her onto a fallen log, surprisingly gentle for a man his size. Rosie slipped her small hand into Addie's. "You saved me," she whispered. "You were so brave." Addie stared at the girl's wide, terrified eyes. No one had ever called her brave. No one had ever held her hand with trust. "I couldn't let them take you," Addie managed. They would have done terrible things." Garrett straightened slowly, grimacing as one of his wounds reopened and bled through his shirt. Addie's healer instincts surged forward. "You've been shot," she said. 3 times. "One grazed me," he said. "One still in my shoulder. One went clean through my side." "You need a doctor." "No time," he murmured. "Slavers travel in packs. More could be coming. I have to get Rosie home." "You won't make it home on your feet," Addie said firmly. "Not with that much blood loss." Rosie looked at her father, eyes wide. "Papa, please listen." The man's jaw flexed. Addie took a slow breath. "My name is Adelaide Morrison. You can call me Addie. I know field medicine. Let me help you. If you collapse with your daughter in the middle of the forest, neither of you will survive." He stared at her, really stared. Not at her size, not with ridicule, but with a soldier's hard calculation. Could she be trusted? Could she help? Did he have a choice? At last, he nodded. "My name is Garrett Ashwood," he said. "This is my daughter Rosie. And Addie, what you did today, I owe you more than my life." He staggered. Addie moved instinctively, sliding her arm beneath his to support his enormous weight. Rosie hurried to grab the reins of Garrett's horse. Addie expected Garrett to hesitate at leaning on her. Most men recoiled at the idea of her strength, but he didn't resist. He didn't even blink at depending on her size to keep him upright. "Rosie," Garrett said hoarsely, "lead us home." "Yes, Papa." The girl took the horse's reins, head high despite her fear. Together they walked, through the shifting shadows of the forest, across the whispering creek, up the rise where Garrett's cabin came into view, silent, broken, bullet scars marking the door. Addie felt a tremor of dread. The slavers had attacked this place, violated it, tried to destroy the life Garrett had built. "Inside," Addie said, tightening her hold. "Now." And for the first time in her life, she wasn't following anyone. She was leading. The walk to the cabin was long and harrowing. Garrett's weight pressed heavily against Addie, but she didn't falter. She'd carried bolts of fabric larger than some men. She'd carried grief heavier than her own body. Carrying a wounded father desperate to stay conscious for his daughter was something she refused to fail at. Rosie led the horse, glancing back every few steps. "Papa, are you still awake?" "I'm here, little one," Garrett rasped. But his feet dragged more with each step, and Addie felt his body tremble with the effort to remain upright. His blood soaked the side of her dress, hot at first, then cooling in the mountain air. "You should be on the horse," Addie said quietly. "No," he muttered. "If I fall, I want to fall on my feet." Addie didn't argue further. Men like Garrett Ashwood weren't carried. They were supported, guided, respected. So she became his anchor, steady and unyielding, matching each of his staggered steps. They reached the clearing just as clouds swallowed the afternoon sun. Garrett's cabin stood tall, but shattered. Windows cracked, chairs broken, the door splintered where slavers had kicked it in. Proof of the violence Rosie had escaped by inches. Addie felt fury rise like a storm. "Inside," she said, guiding Garrett over the threshold. Rosie hurried to close the door behind them, her small hands shaking. Addie scanned the room. The cabin was solid, spacious, and clearly once well kept. But the chaos left by the kidnappers was unmistakable. Overturned tables, scattered belongings, blood droplets darkening the floorboards. Garrett tried to pull away from Addie, as if ashamed to depend on her this long, but the attempt made him sway dangerously. "Sit," Addie ordered, steering him toward the sturdy bed in the corner. Garrett sank onto it, breath ragged. "Rosie," Addie said gently, "can you be brave for me?" The little girl nodded fiercely. "Good. I need clean water and the medicine chest your mama kept. Do you know where it is?" Rosie pointed to a cedar trunk at the foot of the bed. "Papa said Mama put everything important in there before she got sick." Addie knelt, opening the trunk. She found bandages, salves, needles, thread, and an assortment of herbs. A woman who had prepared for every emergency. A woman who had loved her family fiercely. Addie's heart clenched. "Rosie, heat water. Fill that pot halfway." The girl scurried to obey, eager for any task that might save her father. Addie returned to Garrett. "Mr. Ashwood, I need to see the wounds." "Garrett," he corrected, voice hoarse. She swallowed. "Garrett, I need to remove your shirt." His expression flickered, surprise, embarrassment, pain, but he nodded. Addie slid an arm behind him to steady his weight as she worked the shredded, blood-soaked shirt from his shoulders. His muscles tensed, but not from modesty. From agony, bullet wounds, two deep, one shallow. Addie assessed them carefully. "The one in your shoulder needs to come out. The one in your ribs missed anything vital, but it needs cleaning. The graze on your side will heal." Garrett watched her with steady, unflinching eyes. "You know what you're doing." "My grandmother was a healer," Addie said. "She taught me everything before she passed." Garrett gave the faintest nod of respect. "Then I trust you." The words hit her unexpectedly deep. Few men had trusted her with anything beyond sewing. Rosie hurried over with hot water. Addie set to work. She cleaned each wound with methodical care, whispering instructions to Rosie, who watched with wide, determined eyes. When she heated the blade of Garrett's hunting knife to extract the shoulder bullet, Garrett's hand fisted in the bed frame. "Rosie," Addie said softly, "hold his other hand. Let him know he's not alone." The girl climbed onto the bed and wrapped both arms around her father's massive hand. Garrett's breath hitched. He didn't cry out, but his jaw clenched as Addie worked the hot blade in. Blood welled. Addie's fingers stayed steady. Her grandmother had always said, "Steady hands save lives." When the bullet came free, clattering into the metal bowl, Garrett shuddered violently. "Good," Addie murmured. "I've got you. It's over." Rosie threw her arms around him. Addie stitched the torn flesh, applied salves, and wrapped the bandages tight. An hour later, Garrett was slumped back against the pillows, pale but breathing easier. Rosie curled at his side, refusing to leave him. Addie cleaned the room, righted overturned chairs, swept glass from the floor. By the time she finally sat, her knees ached, her fingers throbbed, and her dress was stiff with blood. Garrett watched her through half-lidded eyes. "You should rest," he murmured. "So should you. My daughter is alive because of you." Addie looked away, flushing. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said firmly, "not anyone. Plenty of people would have watched from the trees. Plenty would have been too afraid. You weren't." She folded her hands tightly. I couldn't let them take her." He studied her for a long moment. "I owe you more than thanks." Addie shook her head. "You owe me nothing." Garrett's voice dropped to a rough whisper. "Then stay, until I heal, until we're sure they're not coming back. Please." Addie's breath caught. No man had ever asked her to stay, and yet, in this shattered cabin, with a wounded giant who trusted her and a little girl who clung to her like safety itself, the answer rose in her chest like a flame. "Yes," she said softly, "I'll stay." The next morning dawned cold and pale, the kind of mountain light that seemed to seep gently into every corner of a home. Addie woke on the small cot she'd dragged near the hearth, stiff and sore from yesterday's ordeal. But the moment she sat up, she remembered why she was there, why her muscles ached, why her dress was stiff with dried blood. Garrett Ashwood was alive because of her hands, and Rosie slept peacefully because she wasn't taken into darkness. Addie rose quietly, rekindled the fire, and began preparing breakfast. Cornmeal mush sweetened with a little honey she'd found in a jar on the shelf. Her movements were steady, careful. The cabin still bore the marks of violence: broken chair legs, clawed floorboards, a smashed cupboard door. But now, with the fire crackling and the smell of warm porridge filling the air, the place felt gentler, as if Addie's presence softened the harsh edges the slavers had left behind. When she stepped into the bedroom with 2 steaming bowls, she found Rosie perched at her father's bedside, her small hand resting protectively on Garrett's arm. "Morning, sweetheart," Addie whispered. Rosie turned with a smile so bright it nearly undid her. "Morning, Mama Addie." Addie froze. Garrett blinked awake at the sound. His gaze flicked to Rosie, then to Addie. He didn't correct the child. He didn't flinch from the name. He simply looked at Addie with something deep and unspoken in his storm-dark eyes. Addie swallowed hard and set the bowls down. "Let's eat before it gets cold." Rosie tucked into her portion happily. Garrett accepted his with a quiet nod of thanks. Addie fed him the first few bites until he insisted on taking the spoon himself, grimacing but determined. "You shouldn't strain your shoulder," Addie warned. "I can still hold a spoon," he said. "Barely." His smile, faint as it was, felt like a sunrise breaking inside her. Later that day, Addie helped him sit up properly while Rosie swept the floor with more enthusiasm than skill. The rhythm of the cabin began to shift, repairing, healing, returning to life. Addie cleaned every wound twice daily. Garrett hissed with pain, but he never pulled away from her touch. His eyes would lock on hers, steady, unashamed, and something in her chest would twist painfully. She tried not to look too long, but he looked, and each time he did, it felt like he saw her. Not her size, not her scars, her. In the evenings, when the mountains exhaled cold air and darkness pressed against the windows, Addie cooked simple meals over the fire. Rosie chattered beside her, telling stories about her mother, how she used to braid Rosie's hair, how she sang lullabies in a soft, lilting voice. "Do you sing, Mama Addie?" Rosie asked one night. Addie's breath caught. No one's ever asked me to." "Can you try?" Addie hesitated. Her voice was nothing special, soft, a little husky. But she began humming a tune her grandmother had taught her, a gentle melody that rose and fell like the creek outside. Garrett, who had been dozing, opened his eyes. He watched her as if the sound were something rare. When she finished, Rosie clapped. "Papa, did you hear? Mama Addie sings pretty." Garrett's voice was quiet. "Yes, she does." Addie had to turn away to hide the flush rising in her cheeks. As days stretched into weeks, small rituals took shape. Each morning, Addie checked Garrett's wounds. Garrett insisted he could stand on his own. Rosie corrected him. "Papa, Mama Addie says no, so no." Each afternoon, Addie mended torn seams and tidied the cabin. Garrett sat by the fire, sharpening tools one-handed, watching her with quiet admiration when he thought she wasn't looking. Rosie followed Addie everywhere, claiming she needed to help Mama Addie with important chores. And each night, the three of them sat together by the hearth while the wind rattled the shutters. Garrett told Rosie a story from his scouting days, softened to remove the darker parts. Addie listened, captivated by the low rumble of his voice, the gravel of his laughter, the warmth that filled the room when he spoke. Sometimes, only sometimes, Addie felt like she belonged there, like she wasn't merely visiting someone else's life, but stepping into a place that had always been waiting for her. One evening, Garrett shifted on the bed, wincing. Addie immediately rose to check him. "Your shoulder needs rest," she said gently. "You're overusing it." "I heal faster than most," he argued. "Men always think that," she murmured. He chuckled, a sound that tugged something inside her. Then his expression softened. "You're tired," he said. "I can see it." "I'm fine," Addie insisted. "You've worked from before dawn until after dark every day since you arrived. No one could keep that pace without wearing down." Addie looked away. "In Timber Creek, if I slowed down, people would say I was lazy because of my size, so I learned to push through." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Then Timber Creek is full of idiots." Addie blinked. He continued, voice steady. "You've done more in 2 weeks than most people do in a month. You've kept my daughter safe. You've kept me alive. And you've made this cabin feel like home again." Addie felt her throat tighten. "Garrett!" He reached for her hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "You're not a burden," he said. "Not to Rosie, not to me, not to this home." Her breath trembled. Then, as if realizing he'd said too much, he released her hand and leaned back against the pillows. But the air between them had shifted, warm and delicate, like the moment before snow begins to fall. Later, after Rosie fell asleep and the fire dimmed, Addie tucked a blanket around Garrett one last time before retiring to her cot. As she turned to leave, Garrett spoke softly. "Addie." She paused. "Thank you," he said, "for staying." She swallowed. "I'll stay as long as you need me." He closed his eyes, voice low. "I'm beginning to think I'll need you longer than I deserve." Addie stood in the firelight a moment longer, heart pounding, before whispering a good night that barely reached the air. Outside, the mountains kept silent watch. Inside, something fragile and miraculous was taking root. The mountain summer should have been peaceful. Pine-scented breezes, wildflowers nodding along the creek, warm nights humming with crickets. But inside Garrett Ashwood's cabin, peace began to feel like a thin blanket stretched over a darker truth waiting to surface. Addie sensed it first. It was in the way Garrett paused sometimes, listening for sounds distant and unseen, in how Rosie clung to Addie's skirts whenever a twig snapped outside. In the nights, Garrett woke with a low groan, not from pain, but from memory. Slavers rarely worked alone. 2 weeks after the rescue, Garrett was strong enough to walk without leaning on the walls. His shoulders still twinged when he lifted it too high, but the wounds were healing clean. Addie's stitching, tight, careful, had saved him from infection. "You got a healer's hands," Garrett said one morning as Addie rewrapped his bandages. "My grandmother taught me," Addie murmured. "She said a woman should know how to bring life into the world and keep death at bay." Garrett's gaze softened. "She taught you well." Addie lowered her eyes, warmth blooming in her chest. But even that warmth held an edge, because Garrett watched the window more than he watched her hands. And he was worried. Later that afternoon, Addie took Rosie outside to gather firewood. Rosie skipped ahead, humming a tune. Addie kept close, scanning the tree line the way Garrett had shown her. "Papa says the forest is safe," Rosie said, "but he also says safe things can change when bad people come." Addie's throat tightened. "Your papa is a wise man." "He says you're wise too," Rosie said, grinning. "He told me you see things he doesn't." Addie froze. "He said that?" Rosie nodded. "He said, 'Addie's got eyes that notice danger before I hear it.' He said he trusts you." Addie wasn't sure what stunned her more, that Garrett trusted her, or that he'd told Rosie so plainly. Before she could respond, Rosie gasped, "Addie, look!" Along the creek, boot prints marred the soft mud. Not Garrett's. Too large for Rosie's. Too fresh to be old. Someone had passed through recently. Addie crouched, heart thudding. The prints weren't slaver boots. These were heavier, better made. A hunter's boot, a soldier's, a bounty hunter's. She followed the tracks along the bank until they diverged, heading toward the ridge above the cabin. "Addie," Rosie whispered, clutching her arm, "is someone watching us?" Addie didn't answer. She couldn't, not without lying. She took Rosie's hand and hurried back to the cabin, her mind racing. Garrett was chopping wood when they arrived. The moment he saw Addie's face, the axe stilled mid-swing. "What happened?" "Someone was here." Addie pointed toward the creek. "Boot prints. Fresh." Garrett's jaw hardened. "How fresh?" "An hour, maybe less." He set the axe aside. "Rosie, inside." The child obeyed at once, slipping through the door. Garrett turned to Addie. "Show me." They walked to the creek, moving with silent urgency. Garrett crouched beside the tracks. His eyes scanned the ground, the soil disturbed near the ridge, the brush broken where someone had knelt. "Whoever it was," he muttered, "they watched the cabin." Addie swallowed. "Are the slavers back?" "No. Slavers leave chaos behind. They don't track quietly." "Then who?" Garrett rose slowly. "There's a man who's been sniffing around these hills the past year, a bounty hunter named Whit Garrison. Takes any job that pays well. Missing persons, debts, revenge inquiries." "What would he want with you?" "It's not me he's after." Garrett's eyes darkened. "It's Rosie. Some men don't like losing profit." Addie felt cold. "Someone hired him to finish what the slavers started." Garrett nodded grimly. "And now he knows Rosie survived." He looked at Addie. "And he knows you did too." Addie hugged herself, feeling suddenly exposed beneath the open sky. "Garrett, I'm not afraid for me. I'm afraid for you, for Rosie." Garrett stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And I'm afraid of what will happen if you leave." "Leave?" Addie whispered. "You don't owe us this danger." Addie shook her head fiercely. "You don't understand. Timber Creek is not my home. I'm mocked there, forgotten. I've only been here a few weeks, but this cabin, Rosie, this is the first place I've felt needed in years." Garrett stared at her, jaw clenching with emotion he didn't hide quickly enough. Before he could speak, Rosie appeared at the door. "Papa!" she cried. "There's something on the porch." Addie and Garrett hurried back. A bundle of sagebrush lay on the steps, tied with twine, a sliver of bone tucked inside, the mark of a tracker. Garrett's face went still. "He's close," he said. "Closer than we thought." Addie felt her pulse hammering. "What do we do?" Garrett took a breath, steady and deep, a soldier's breath. "We prepare. We fortify the cabin. We keep Rosie near, and we don't let anyone in who we don't trust." Addie nodded slowly, but Garrett wasn't finished. He stepped closer, voice dropping. "And, Addie, there's something else." Her heart stumbled. "What?" He hesitated only a moment. "I don't want you to leave this cabin," he said softly. "Not just because of danger, not just because I need your help, but because—" Addie waited, breath caught in her chest. "Because when you're here, the house feels alive again." Her hands trembled. "Garrett." He looked at her, unguarded. "Stay," he said. "Stay until the danger passes. Stay longer if you want. Just stay." Addie felt the words settle into her bones like warmth after a long freeze. "I'll stay," she whispered, and though neither of them said it aloud, the truth lay between them like a spark waiting for breath. They were no longer just a wounded man, a lonely woman, and a frightened child. They were becoming a family. The attack didn't come at night, as Garrett expected. It came at dawn, when mountain mist clung low and the world felt half awake, half dreaming, when even the bravest hearts were slow to rise. Addie was stirring the morning fire when she heard it. A slow, deliberate knock, not frantic, not hesitant. A measured rapping, 3 firm taps that carried through the very bones of the cabin. Garrett, half-dressed, grabbed his rifle. His wounds protested, but he ignored the pain. "Addie," he murmured, "step back." "No." She rose, moving to stand beside him. "I won't hide from whoever's out there." Rosie sat up in her bed, eyes wide. Addie turned to her. "Sweetheart, stay behind me." Another knock, 3 more taps, slow as a countdown. Garrett approached the door, rifle at the ready. He lifted the latch, but Addie caught his arm. "Garrett," she whispered, "whatever happens, we face it together. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something raw flickered in his eyes. Gratitude, fear, devotion. He nodded. Then he pulled the door open. The man on the porch looked like he'd been carved out of the very mountains he hunted in. Tall, lean, with a wolf-gray coat and boots dusted in red clay. His hat shadowed a face lined with hard ears. A rifle rested easily in his arms, too easily for comfort. Whit Garrison, the bounty hunter. His gaze moved over Garrett, then Addie, then, coldly, into the cabin where Rosie hid behind Addie's skirts. "Well, now," Garrison drawled, "I see the rumors were true. The Ashwood girl lives." Garrett stepped forward, blocking the view. "State your business." Garrison smiled without warmth. "Simple. 3 men turned up dead. One with his skull split by a stone big enough to have been swung by a giant or a very angry woman." He tipped his hat to Addie. "Ma'am." Addie's pulse hammered, but she didn't look away. "Those men were slavers," Garrett growled. "They shot me, kidnapped my daughter. Their deaths were justified." "Maybe," Garrison said, "but the law don't see it that way. Families want compensation. A judge wants answers. And someone with deep pockets, wants that little girl found and delivered." Rosie whimpered. Addie stepped fully in front of her. Garrison's eyes slid toward Addie with mild amusement. "Big woman like you," he said. "Can't be easy blocking bullets with just your body." Addie didn't move, didn't blink. "You won't touch her." Garrison chuckled. "Ma'am, you think standing there changes anything?" "Yes," Addie said. "It changes everything." Garrett lowered his rifle, not out of surrender, but out of intent. When he spoke, his voice was ice. "Garrison, you walk away now, and we never speak of this again. No one hunts you, no one tracks you, no one buries you." A beat. "But if you take one step toward my daughter, I'll end you where you stand." Garrison tilted his head. "You threatening me, mountain man?" Garrett's jaw tensed. "I'm promising you." Garrison's smile faded. $50,000 says I walk away with the girl." Addie's voice cracked like a whip. "Over my dead body." Garrison raised his rifle, not at Garrett, but at Addie. That was his mistake. Garrett moved first, a blur of fury and protective instinct. He shoved Addie aside and fired. Garrison dove behind the porch post, returning a shot that splintered the cabin door. Rosie screamed. Addie grabbed her, shielding her with her own body as they ducked behind the hearth. "Stay down," Addie whispered fiercely. Outside, boots pounded on the porch. Then silence. Addie dared to peek over the hearth. Garrett and Garrison circled each other through the mist. 2 predators, 2 fathers, 2 men who knew only one could walk away alive. Snow kicked up in bursts around their feet, rifles flashing in the pale morning light. Every breath Addie held felt like it might be her last. Then a single shot, echoing through the valley, cutting the morning wide open. Garrison stumbled. Garrett stood firm. Then the bounty hunter collapsed onto the porch, rifle slipping from his hand, snow blooming red beneath him. Garrett staggered back, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the fallen man. Addie rushed to him. "Garrett, are you hit?" He shook his head, gripping her arm, not out of weakness, but out of grounding himself. "He's dead," Garrett whispered. "It's done." "No," Addie said softly, her voice trembling as she looked at Garrison's still form. "This was just the beginning. Whoever hired him, they'll come next." Garrett looked at her, then at Rosie, then back at her. "Then we fight," he said, "but not alone." Addie reached for his hand, and for the first time He didn't let go. The snow had stopped, but the silence afterward felt heavier than the storm. Garrett and Addie dragged Garrison's body away from the porch, covering him with a tarp until they could decide what to do next. Neither spoke. Fear hung between them. Fear of what this death meant. Fear of who might come looking next. But beneath that fear was something else, something binding, something undeniable. Inside the cabin, Rosie clung to Addie's waist until Addie knelt and folded her close. "You're safe," Addie whispered, smoothing the girl's hair. "You're safe, sweetheart. I promise." Garrett stood in the doorway watching them, exhaustion pulling at his face, but his eyes were fixed on Addie as if seeing her anew, like a woman who didn't just save his daughter's life, but held his world together with sheer force of heart. When Rosie finally drifted to sleep, worn out by fear and tears, Addie carried her to bed. She lingered a moment, brushing a braid from the girl's forehead. The child sighed, soft and trusting, curling into her pillow. Garrett stepped beside her, voice low. "She's taken to you." "I've taken to her," Addie admitted, "and to this cabin, and to—" She stopped. Garrett waited. Addie steadied herself. "I don't know if what I feel belongs here, or if it's just because you needed me. People don't usually need me." Garrett turned fully toward her. "Addie," he said, voice almost rough, "I need you now more than I've needed anyone in years, maybe ever." Her breath caught. He gestured around them. "Look at this home. Look at my daughter. Look at me. You brought life back to a place I thought was doomed. You made Rosie laugh again. You kept me alive. None of that was obligation. That was you, and I—" His voice broke just a little. "I'm a better man for it." Addie pressed a hand to her chest, as if keeping her heart from stumbling out. The fire crackled softly, warming the quiet between them. Outside, the porch still bore the weight of conflict, but inside, the cabin glowed, golden, gentle, a small sanctuary against the world. "Garrett," Addie whispered, "what are we supposed to do now? They won't stop. Whoever hired Garrison, they'll send more." Garrett nodded. "Yes, they will." He reached out slowly, as if giving her every chance to refuse, and took her hand. "But you're not alone anymore. We'll protect Rosie together. We'll protect each other. We'll make this place stronger than any threat that comes." Addie's eyes glistened. "Are you sure I belong here? Truly belong?" Garrett stepped closer, touching his forehead to hers, a gesture as intimate as any vow. "This is your home if you'll have it," he murmured. "Rosie wants you here. I want you here. Stay with us, Addie, not because we're in danger, but because—" His voice softened. "Because love like this doesn't come twice in a lifetime." The firelight flickered across their faces. Addie's tears finally spilled, quiet, relieved, full of longing she'd carried for years. "Then I'll stay," she whispered, "no matter what comes." They stood together as the mountains outside shuddered in a cold wind, two wounded hearts, one child, one home, one future, trembling at the threshold of hope. But the world beyond that cabin door was shifting, and the question whispered in the crackling fire asked the truth neither dared say aloud. Was their love strong enough to withstand the claws of the men already coming for them? If you've stayed with Addie, Garrett, and little Rosie through every breathless moment, then you already know something true. Families aren't always born. They're chosen, fought for, built from courage and tenderness in the darkest hours. Out there in the Colorado wilds, their cabin burns warm against a world determined to break them, and in that glow, you and I are reminded that love, real love, doesn't come easily, but it comes boldly. Tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Every comment, every city, every country reminds me that stories like these bind us across distances. And if you still believe in love that refuses to surrender, stay close. The next story awaits you.